UFC Fight Night. Ankalaev versus Walker 2. UFC is back in the Apex this weekend for the first fight of 2024 and what feels like the first fight in months. This should be a very solid card. It really is kind of just whetting the appetite for the bonkers pay-per-views we have coming up here. But definitely some fun storylines and matchups in this card. Let's go ahead and go through these fights. I'm going to provide my breakdown and predictions for each of them. We're starting in the flyweight division with a fight between Joshua Van, who is the minus 235 favorite, and Felipe Bunes, who is the plus 195 underdog. This is a quick turnaround for Josh Van. He fought most recently this past November of last year. Took on Kevin Borjas in that fight and really showed an entirely different level of striking from Borjas, who was, I'm pretty sure, undefeated up until that point. Van's got super fast hands and pretty solid power, and he's super young. He's really just getting started in the game and is showing a great level of maturity for a guy who's only 22 years old. He's taking on Kevin Bunes, who's got more experience. He's 34 years old, so he's been training for longer, but I think Van's just the better talent of these two. Feels like a guy that the UFC wants to promote. He's cool, he's flashy, and most of all, he's talented. So I think he wins this one by decision, relies on his the more cleaner striking and the faster hands between these two. His body work is incredible too, so really excited to see how he implements that in that fight. Moving along, we have a lightweight fight between Tom Nolan and Nick Motta. Nolan is the minus 325 favorite, 6-0 overall, making his UFC debut. Motta is the plus 260 underdog, and he is 2-1 in his last 5 fights in the UFC. Nolan, he had a huge Dana White Contender Series debut, got a first-round finish in that fight, and really impressed. He showed superb striking, great power, and he's super tall and long, 6'3". He's going to have a reach advantage against pretty much anyone not named Jalen Turner in the lightweight division. And, above all, he's a finisher. I believe he has all finishes on his record, and definitely looks a lot more advanced than his only 6-0 record would indicate. He's taking on Nick Motta, a guy who kind of had a fluky draw to Trey Ogden, where he was getting dominated that entire fight and, got one of those bizarre situations where he was getting in the, arm triangle and didn't respond to the ref, and they ended the fight and called it a no contest. Totally ridiculous. Motta, the positives, he's got a lot of power, and he can definitely finish guys with his hands, but that's kind of it. I expect Tom Nolan to get a KO here, given his length and just better overall striking acumen. Our next fight we have is a featherweight fight between John Silva and Westin Wilson. Westin Wilson, he's kind of in that Shannon Ross category of an automatic fade. I mean, he's the plus 600 underdog here. John Silva is minus 900 or minus 1,000 on some books. It's almost like, what do you even take here? It seems like Westin Wilson just doesn't really have the athleticism to compete in the UFC. Just looking at Silva, I mean, the guy's solid as a rock, powerful, but truthfully, he didn't really impress me that much in his Dana White Contender Series debut. If there is a path to victory for Westin Wilson, it's going to be tiring Silva out and, trying to put in work later on in the fight, because I think early on there's going to be a stark power difference. I'm taking Silva by sub here, honestly, solely based on the fact that he's Brazilian and just way stronger than Westin Wilson. We'll see. I mean, if you're feeling just absolutely devious, a sprinkle on Westin Wilson could be worthwhile, or perhaps a live bet late into the fight, but I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's very many good options to play in this one. Next fight we have is a bantamweight matchup between Farid, Basharat, and Taylor Lapilus. Basharat is the minus 285 favorite, 11-0 undefeated. Lapilus is 1-0 in the UFC, 19-3 overall, and is the plus 230 underdog. This is a really good bantamweight matchup here. Basharat is the heavy favorite, probably a little more so than I'd place the line at. I'd probably be looking closer to minus 200, just based out of what we've seen in these two guys. Basharat comes with a super strong grappling background, and he's been able to rely on that in his UFC career up to this point. Lapilus, he's a strong guy. He's built, and he's got solid striking, but Caleb Loughran in their fight got to his legs pretty easily, and even if Lapilus was able to defend those takedowns, it feels like if Basharat gets as deep as Loughran had gotten, that he'll be able to take him down much more easily. So I think there's going to be a pretty stark wrestling advantage in this one. I'm taking Basharat by decision. I think he should be able to just rely on the grappling differences to find a victory here. Next fight we got is a bantamweight matchup between Marcus McGhee and Gaston Bolaños. McGhee is minus 250 favorite in this one, 2-0 in the UFC. Bolaños is 1-0 in the UFC and did go 6-3 in Bellator. So, Bolaños has had probably, you could argue, more high-level MMA experience than Marcus McGhee, just being in Bellator for basically his entire career up to this point. But McGhee, he's only had 2 UFC fights under his belt, but he's gotten 2 back-to-back finishes, a KO and a sub. He's a really powerful striker. He's got fast hands, and he does have that submission. So, it's safe to assume his grappling is pretty strong. Bolaños is a really aggressive guy. I mean, he's coming in to find a finish, and he does have some flashy KOs under his belt, but I think that aggressive approach could get him caught in this one. McGee's just, I like his striking style a bit more, less reliant on spinning stuff, more, straight down the pipe, simple, boxing stuff. I think he finds a KO in this one, giving Bolaños what I believe would be his first or second KO loss of his career. And the final fight on the prelims is a welterweight matchup between Matthew Semelsberger and Preston Parsons. Semelsberger is the minus 135 favorite, 2-3 in his last 5 fights, with Parsons being the slight plus 115 underdog, going 1-2 in the UFC. Semi's had a tough go of it as of late. Had that razor close fight with Jeremiah Wells where, he was cracking Wells. It kind of looked like a lot of his fights up to that point. He was showing off his power, looking really strong. But then Wells just was able to take him down absolutely at will, almost as if, almost like Semelsberger wasn't even fighting it. And then he followed up that really close loss with a KO loss to Uros Medic, where he got caught with like a crazy spinning back fist and put out. Semi's a guy who I think is super talented, but just sort of lacking the well-roundedness that I think you really need at 170. And we've seen guys just take advantage of his takedown defense. And, in walks in Preston Parsons here, a guy who really just wants to take you down the entire fight. I like this matchup from the UFC. They're telling Semi, prove to us that you've been in the gym working on this glaring weakness you have. It's a cool stylistic matchup. I think, the biggest advantage is going to be Parsons wrestling in this one, and he's got really slick takedowns. The question is, can he keep it up for 3 rounds? I think he'll be able to do enough to win this one on the cards. Although, I think a semi late round, 3rd round KO could be a good sprinkle play here, just because Parsons could really tire himself out. And if Semi does, end of the fight, stuffs a few takedowns and keeps this thing standing, I definitely think he could put Parsons away. But the official pick is going to be a Parsons by decision. Moving on to the main card, we have our first fight is a heavyweight bout between Waldo, Cortes-Acosta, and Andrei Arlovski. Cortes-Acosta is the minus 625 favorite, 3-1 in the UFC. Andrei Arlovski is the plus 460 underdog. He is 3-2 in his last 5. Cortes-Acosta, 3-1 in the UFC, but I think if you ask most people, they'd say it's been a bit of a disappointment up to this point. Had that KO in the Dana White Contender Series to get into the UFC, and then he had back 3 straight decisions. 2 he won, and then 1 that he lost. It took him 4 fights to get his first UFC finish, which he did in his most recent fight. He's a guy who really needs to start racking up some KOs. I think if he wants to start gaining any momentum in the heavyweight division. The Andrei Arlovski test really is, if you can't finish him, you probably can't be relied on to finish anyone really in the heavyweight division. He should win this one by KO, but Arlovski has, for what it's worth, I think he's aged a lot better than a lot of people would have expected from him. A guy who's been in as many fights as he has. Definitely, if he gets hit clean, it's probably going to be the end of the fight. But he put together a 3-fight win streak, so nothing that Cortes-Acosta has done is giving me like 100% confidence in this one. But we're going to take him by KO, and I really think that's the only outcome of that fight. Or, somehow a submission win, but that really should be the only outcome he is happy with, taking on Arlovski. Moving along, we have a middleweight fight between Brunno Ferreira, the Hulk. He's taking on Phil Hawes. Ferreira is the minus 130 favorite. He is 1-1 in the UFC. Phil Hawes is 2-3 in his last 5 in the UFC. And it really does seem that Phil Hawes has just morphed into Derek Brunson. He's just kind of filling that hole in the middleweight division that Derek Brunson left when he went to the PFL. A guy who's phenomenal even for the first 2 minutes, and then as soon as he gets hit or pressured really in any way, he just crumbles. What I will say is he has been fighting super tough guys. Back-to-back losses to Ikram Aliskerov and Roman Dolidze. Those are 2 top 15, consensus top 15, if not top 10 guys that he's lost back-to-back to. And even in that Ikram fight, he looked good. The difference in speed was significant, and I think that was an eye-opening fight in regards to looking at Ikram for me, because Phil Hawes was landing, and he was landing a lot, but as soon as Ikram found the chin, it was over. Ferreira, he had his a super crazy KO win over RoboCop in his UFC debut as a massive underdog. I picked him in that fight because he's got power, and I knew that RoboCop was a guy who leaves his chin wide up in the air to get knocked out. Ferreira's kind of smaller for the 185 division. If he could, he probably should move down to 170, but I don't know if it's if his body can really do that. Regardless, I'm taking Ferreira by KO. This could be a good live bet opportunity if Phil Hawes is putting it on him early and somehow makes it past the first round. I just don't think Hawes has the chin to last 15 rounds with Ferreira, or 15 minutes with Ferreira. Our next fight is a bantamweight fight between Ricky Simón and Mario Bautista. Simone's the minus 180 favorite, 4-1 in his last 5. Bautista is plus 150, 5-0 in his last 5. Bautista's definitely been handling his business. He's racked up a 5-win streak, impressive. No matter who you're fighting. Although it is noteworthy that he has been fighting the best guys. Damon Blackshear is probably the best name he's beat in that 5 fights. Besides that, he beat guys like Guido Cagnetti and Brian Kelleher. He doesn't really come with much of a KO threat. He's got 0 KOs in the UFC. And he's a guy who's kind of relied on his grappling to win his fights, and he's found quite a few submissions, but I don't know if he's got strong enough grappling to beat Ricky Simón. I think Simone's going to be far and away the better wrestler, and Simone's just like a fire hydrant. Like, I just can't imagine a guy like Bautista consistently taking him down and keeping him down. I think Simón wins this one by decision and puts on a pretty stereotypical Simón decision win performance where he just dominates in the grappling. Our next fight, we have a lightweight fight between old reliable Jim Miller taking on Gabriel Benitez. Miller is the minus 120 favorite. He is 4-1 in his last 5. Benitez is an even here and is 2-3 in his last 5. And I'll make this one real simple. I'm taking Jim Miller over Brock Lesnar right now. I know that's probably one of the more ridiculous arguments or questions going around the MMA community this past weekend, but I'm taking Jim Miller over Brock Lesnar, and if I'm taking him over Brock Lesnar, I'm definitely taking him over Gabriel Benitez. Jim Miller is a professional athlete. Brock, and this is turning into a Jim Miller versus Brock breakdown, but I don't care because it's more fun to talk about. And let's be honest, Brock's a professional actor. I think if you let Brock, take whatever substances he wanted and you gave him maybe a year to get his body right, maybe he beats Jim Miller. But quite frankly, I think Jim Miller beats the heck out of Brock. Simple as that. I mean, Brock, there's nothing to support him being able to take a punch from Jim Miller. And, he probably hasn't even thought about jiu-jitsu or grappling in quite some time. Obviously, 28-year-old Brock or, college wrestler, national champ Brock maybe beats Jim Miller, but old man Brock, with the ponytail, I don't see him beating Jim Miller. So, but yeah, I'm taking Miller by KO over Gabriel Benitez. And let me know what you all think about the Brock versus Jim Miller insane, ridiculous debate. I've said my piece. Next up, we would have had our co-main event, Manel Kape versus Matheus Nicolau. Kape misses weight horribly. The fight's canceled. Terrible look, Kape. You can't be talking that much and then not handling your business. He went from a super interesting guy who I think was maybe even a lot of people's dark horse to get a title shot and win the belt this year. And I think that's all but out the window for him now. He's really just embarrassed himself. So with that takes us to our main event. It is the light heavyweight matchup between Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker. Ankalaev hasn't lost a fight since 2018, but he does have those back-to-back, the draw and then the no contest in the most recent Johnny Walker fight. Walker was on a 3-fight win streak going into his last fight in his own right. We all know what happened. Ankalaev hit Walker with one of the more egregious illegal knees you'll see. And the same ref who had gaslit another fighter earlier in the night decided that Johnny Walker was not fit to continue the fight and ended it there. And they called it a no contest. I'm glad Johnny Walker didn't get a fluky win out of that, but a disqualification in that fight would not have surprised me either. Regardless, the insights to gain from the first fight, it kind of went how you thought it would. Johnny Walker went for the crazy flying knee. He did have a little bit of success on the feet. Ankalaev was starting to get going with his striking, though, and did have Walker in a precarious position up against the cage. Going into the last fight, I took Johnny Walker, and what kind of man would I be if I didn't take him again for the exact same reasons? I think I like Johnny Walker's finishing ability. Ankalaev, don't think he's ever been KO'd in his entire career, but I think Walker's the kind of guy to do it. He's shown a lot more patience in recent fights, and I can't imagine him landing that crazy flying knee. It felt like he kind of showed some of the cards in his hands by doing that. And I don't know if he was genuinely rocked or if he was faking it. It seems like he was faking it, but still, I could see Ankalaev going for a takedown and Walker just getting him on the side of the head with elbows and finding a finish that way. They got 5 rounds in there. They're not lasting 25 minutes. There's just no chance. Ankalaev did it versus Jan Blachowicz, but Johnny Walker's a whole nother beast. Walker's big, he's strong, and I think he's looked the best that he ever has before. So Walker by KO is going to be the pick. And with that is the breakdown. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And enjoy the card. This is Phone Home MMA signing out.